Crew, how are we doing? Oh. Crew, Central Coast, how are we doing? Well, hey, we're going to worship, so please stand and sing with us.
His
Cool. Hey, you guys may be seated.
Hello. Yeah.
Yo.
He calls me Deagle because it sounds like seagull.
That's
I don't
pretty
know.
weird.
Anyways,
Wait, who said that?
Alex Denbaugh, where you at? Oh, there he
Oh,
is.
right there. Can you guys hear me?
Thanks,
Is this on?
Alex.
Oh, okay. How was everybody's weekend? I hope it wasn't too stressful after syllabus week, for Cal Poly. You guys are starting? Today was your first day? Congratulations.
Yeah, I feel like even though it's already week 2, I'm like severely behind. Does anyone else feel that way? Thank you. Not alone. We're a family in this. So, what'd you do this weekend, Norris, on this lovely 3-day weekend?
I went to winter conference. Yeah, it was fun. Good time of connecting with Cal Poly students, Cuesta students, Hancock students, and all the other ministry movements from our region. I would say the thing I learned that was the coolest is the difference between transparency and vulnerability. Transparency is like, oh, like I'm going through this thing, like after I process it, learn about it, figure myself out and grow from it, now I'll share how do I want to say this? Now I'll share it with people. Vulnerability is like, I don't really know what I'm going through. I'm trying to figure it out, and then you're sharing that in the moment or while you're processing it. Before that, I thought it was like the same thing, but it's not. So, yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. No. Now we're just gonna go into announcements. There should be a slide. It's gonna be about social media, Snapchat, Instagram, the Crew Central Coast app. If you want to get plugged into a community group or learn about more future events or get plugged into any sort of community, you can download this app. I believe if you're a Droid user, it's still on hold. iOS, App Store. Yes, that. Crew Central Coast on the App Store. Great. So.
Yeah, and then even though it's already the 16th day of the new year, 16th? Yes, 16th day of the new year, we're still rolling with the new year, new us, new quarter, new us. So, morning prayer has been revamped and renamed. So, it is now called Emerge. Now, Emerge, now what's cool is that's actually an acronym, so I want everyone to pay attention because we're all going to say it together after this. Emerge stands for early morning engaging relationally with God and everyone else. So we're all going to say that. We're all going to say it. All right, are we ready? 1, 2, 3.
Early morning engaging relationally with God and everyone else.
So, great job. Hands to you guys.
Emerge.
Yeah, Emerge. So, it's Mondays and Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. in UU Room 219. Yeah, it's a great time to just start off your day, start off your week, start off your Thursday with some prayer. I mean, for all the people who went to WinterCon, be telling your friends how important prayer is for your spiritual growth and just how important it is for our movement to constantly be in that conversation with our Lord and asking us to guide our movement and also our campus and how we interact with our friends. So, go to that. It'll be legit.
Sweet. Now we have another cool event. Very hard to pronounce. Tanbai. We're just gonna go with that. It's a cool event with prayer team and global vision team coming together. There should be some numbers on the slide. It's basically the heart behind it is trying to get us to be in the footsteps of our friends, counterparts, other brothers and sisters in Christ around the world, so that we can get an understanding for what it maybe looks like to be a Christian in a place where it is not allowed. So there aren't going to be very many details. The way that we're going to spread information is by the phone numbers. So if you want to go to this cool event, you have to text the number. If you're a freshman, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, boy or girl, there's certain numbers related to that. And so I'll let you guys take those numbers down. You can text right now, so get your phones out and start texting those numbers.
So we'll give you a minute
Right,
or two for that.
Slash I put.
You don't have to, though. Only if you're
Yeah.
interested, but we strongly recommend.
I might be there. So
I will be there.
someone call me? Is that good? Someone calling me? Oh. Do you want to start now?
What?
Like the next thing, yeah. Okay.
All right. Send in those last numbers. Okay, so the next portion of the night is going to be some sharing time for people who went to Winter Conference. How many people went to Winter Conference again? Woo! So it was a really great weekend, and we had a really sweet, and the theme was prayer. So honestly, I went in like, how long can you talk about prayer? Guys, you can talk about prayer forever. My mind is blown, and prayer is awesome. So
Phone's freaking out.
that being said, there was a lot to soak in this weekend, so there's, I'm sure, still a lot of thoughts going around, maybe some processing still happening. But in the spirit of vulnerability and Cru being a family, we just want to open up that time again for people to share. And something that we touched on at the sharing time when we were debriefing as a movement is that we're a family, and we really want to be able to support each other in all situations. So we want to be able to celebrate together. We also want to be there for each other when we're suffering. So we don't just want to be like, everything's happy all the time, because in the spirit of vulnerability, that's what a family is. Like, we are here for each other. So for those of you who went to WinterCon and maybe God worked in your heart about prayer, or you learned something new about yourself, I would just really encourage you to share with the movement where you're at. So we're going to spend a couple minutes, we're going to be wandering up and down the aisles. If you have something to share, just raise your hand, and we'll come over and give you the mic. And there's nothing too small or too big to share.
Hi guys, I'm Valentina. Hi. So I just wanted to share a quick story about the Day of Faith. On Saturday, as Cal Poly, we went to Santa Monica Pier, and we got to go and share the gospel to everyone there. I was partnered with my friend Nico, and honestly, I came into it like, yeah, let's go save lives. Super excited. I was so down to do it. And we went to like the mall area over there. And honestly, guys, the first 5 people that we went to, it was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested. I'm going to go to work, or even like, I'm going to leave you to talk to someone who would care, or that would like actually listen, you know? So from like coming from a place where I'm like, yeah, let's do this, to that, I was like, oh, we have until 3:30. It's like 2. So yeah, we have a long way to go. So Nico and I stopped everything, and we prayed, and I honestly just prayed like, God, give us something to do until 3:30, because we have to be here. Really, guys. So we're walking back towards where we just walked from, and I don't know how this happened, but Nico and I didn't communicate at all. We were just walking back, and then we both just turned around and faced this elderly homeless lady. And we introduced ourselves and we started talking to her, and we didn't quite understand what she was talking about. Like, she was trying to say something, but we couldn't understand what she was saying. And then she was like, little English. I speak only a little bit of English. And I was like, oh, what language do you speak? She goes, I thought she said Spanish. So I was like, Nico, heck yeah, you speak Spanish. Let's do this. And she goes, no, I speak Ukrainian. You guys, I speak Ukrainian out of all languages. So it was the coolest thing. And then we started off with a conversation where she was like, no, you guys, like, Christians believe in myths, to the end where she was like, yeah, I remember walking down the street and seeing trees and thinking, it has to be God, because who else would do it? So it was just really cool to, like, meet someone randomly that spoke Ukrainian out of all languages, and yeah, and be used like that. That's my story.
Anyone else?
Hey guys, I'm Jake. So continuing in the spirit of vulnerability, which Norris nicely set up, coming into this weekend for WinterCon, I was in a really lonely place, just really struggling with a lot of comparison as well. And if I'm being honest, like, I struggle with that. I've been struggling in that for years. And sometimes the most loneliest nights of my life are here in this room and are out in that foyer. And sometimes I don't feel like I'm worthy to be a leader here, or to lead a community group, or lead men's team, or I just feel so incapable. And it was just hard, like, struggling that with the weekend. Like, there's some really high points, to be sure, like really good moments throughout the weekend, but I just kept coming back to this low space of like, man, I'm so lonely. I'm struggling with this comparison right now. And it's hard. And a lot of times Christian conferences are like IHOP. It's like, come hungry, leave happy. And that's just how it is. And if I'm being honest, guys, like, I've been to a lot of IHOPs, and I still struggle with loneliness, and I still struggle with comparison. And if any of you come into this room on Tuesday nights and you feel the same way, just know that you're not alone. You're not. And it's not even with just me, but you have a God who came down to earth and was alone on the cross. So I just want this movement and our worship and our fellowship to have this posture of vulnerability. Like, it's okay. Like, sometimes we aren't happy, and that's okay. And we can give God our loneliness, and we can give God our comparison, because he was lonely too, and he can stand with us amidst that pain. So that's where I'm at.
Yo, what's up, guys? I'm Jonah, and I just wanted to share a personal story from the weekend. A little bit of background. Through college, I've put a lot of pressure on myself. Coming into college, I always dreamed of college being this amazing experience full of so much fun, and it has been. But man, I feel like I have to be the perfect college student, and I feel like I have to sometimes, like, have a lot of comparison with people in my major. Like, am I as smart as them? Am I doing as well as them? And it can be a huge weight on me to, and I didn't even think I realized it until recently. And this weekend, I was in one of the sessions, and I was feeling kind of emotional, so I went to the back and just sat. And honestly, I was praying. I wasn't even really listening to the speaker, but the Lord showed up in a super cool moment where something that the speaker said just like popped out at me out of nowhere, and it felt like he was saying it directly to me. and that never happened to me before. But he said that God is pleased with you, and I was slain at that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, that's like exactly what I needed to hear, because I was just feeling like a lot of comparison. I was feeling like I've been making a lot of mistakes, and I even said to God, like, are you sure you're pleased with me? Like, I don't feel like you're pleased with me. I feel like there's so many more things I can do and so much more opportunities I can take, and I feel really heavy. But he just kept like saying that at me, and I was just had so much joy in that moment, and I like knew that he was pleased with me. And I know that pressure is a thing that a lot of people deal with in college, whether it's like pressure to figure out your future before you graduate, or maybe comparison with friends, like, oh man, other people seem to have more friends than me, or something like that. And man, I truly believe that God is pleased with everybody here in this room. And you might think like, yeah, Jonah, but you don't know what I've done. You don't know like what I've been going through. You don't know what I'm struggling with. But that's why Jesus came. And he came and he overcame that. And he loves you exactly the way you are, and he's proud of all you guys.
Any more people?
We got one.
All right, so I'm going to talk something similar that like my homegirl over there, Valentina, talked about. I've never met her, but hi, my name is Christian. Hey. So yeah, like the Santa Monica theme, we went out there and we did some evangelism, which was pretty cool. And I went into it kind of like iffy. I've kind of done evangelism before through a different method called Evangelism Explosion. So I kind of went into it. We used this little book called like KGP. It's like Know God Personally or something like that. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to pair myself up with someone that's already kind of done this before, that's a leader. So where's my girl, Anna? Is she out there? Hey, she's right there. She has a twin, which is super trippy. Like, I saw them and kind of got confused once. I was about to go up to her, and I totally, like, it was at IKEA. But, yeah, we had a family dinner at IKEA. It was pretty good. Had meatballs. But, so, yeah, we were out there in Santa Monica, and, like, we're walking around, and, so I don't know if you like noticed, but like last Tuesday there was this thing where like you texted the number, and like if you were like the first person, you like got a like scholarship to go. And so like I originally had plans with my friends to come for the weekend, and my friend Beth was like, oh, you should text just in case. So I texted, and I wasn't the first name called, and my friend Beth turned to me and she's like, yeah, you didn't get it because you're a super slow texter. Like she said, she's never seen someone text as slow as I did. So I was kind of disappointed. But then when they said, but what you didn't know is that we're like gonna, give a scholarship to 2 people. So then they said the number, and I was like, whoa, that's me. And it was just kind of crazy because like if I'm such a slow texter, how did like I become the second number? But yeah, so I think it was definitely like, now taking it like on a serious note, like it was definitely, I think, God's plan for me to go. He kind of like said, like he like stopped everyone else's number and like let my text go through, and then there you go, like I was up there like accepting my scholarship. Not really, that didn't happen. But yeah, so my point is like I went out with Anna to Santa Monica, and like there's a specific, we talked to a few people, like 3, but like there was one specifically that was like I think meant to be, and I think that's why God stopped those texts, and he was like, Christian, you're going, there's a purpose that you're going on this trip. And it was with this girl, Angie, and she was a second year at Academy of the Arts in San Francisco, and she's from China. And so we talked to her, and we asked her, like, have you ever heard of Jesus? And she's like, Jesus? Who's that? She's never heard the name before. And so I like kind of looked at Anna and was like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, she's never heard who Jesus is. Like, what are we going to do? And so Anna's like immediate reaction is like, oh, well, I'm going to take out this app that like they told us to like have people download. And so that was in that moment when I was like, I know this other method that maybe while she's bringing the app up, I can use what I was trained in and kind of give a little demo of like who Jesus is. So I did this whole like presentation with like my phone and like my hands, and explained like who Jesus was and how he was sent on earth to die for our sins, and because of that we're forgiven and allowed to go to heaven, even though we don't deserve it. And so after this little explanation, Angie was like, "That totally makes sense. Like, you explained it so well." Like, she finally, for the first time, found out who Jesus was and why we believe in him. And so just having the opportunity with Anna to basically introduce Jesus to someone who's never heard of Jesus before was something that really impacted me in my heart, because I thought to myself, like, well, the United States is like, people claim to be mostly Christian, but here is someone coming from China where, you know, it's basically still illegal to have a Bible and believe in Jesus. And just having that opportunity to hopefully she makes a decision, whether it's another person coming up to her and asking her if she knows who Jesus is, or maybe if it's something more personal where she opens up that app that she downloaded and says, "Hey, like, I want to learn more. I want to be saved."
Sweet. We have time for one more person to share. You feel that urge? You just want to put your hand up right now?
Hi, my name is Vanessa. I'm from Cuesta. Woo! Okay. So I went to Wintercom, and there was this like time where like they sang this girl played acoustic version of that song by Ty Smith. Huh? Oh, Even When It Hurts. It's such a good song. If you guys haven't heard it, you should listen to it. But there was this guy who was painting a drawing. He basically painted anything that he felt in the room. And there was this like figure in the bottom, and it looked like it was kneeling down. And I just kept staring at that. Like, I felt so tight. Like, it's like, what does this mean? But as the song was going, I just felt like God was like, "That's what you need to do, Vanessa. You need to bow down and surrender to me, all of you." And I felt so good when he told me that. I felt so washed and so free, and I felt genuinely happy, and I started crying a bit, which I'm also learning to like let go. But it was awesome. And after that, he was telling me to give a bunch of people hugs, which is weird, like people I didn't know too well, but it was pretty awesome. Yeah, that was it.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, there it is. I can hear myself now. I love that. I love getting a chance to just get little snapshots. You know what the Lord did during our weekend down in Burbank, California for the winter conference. I think, there's a couple reasons we do that kind of thing. One of the main reasons, honestly, is to just give God glory, to be able to tell of his power and the way that he's working and the way that he's changing our lives. Just to remind people that he's real. And he's speaking and he's moving and he's guiding us to people who speak Ukrainian and all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, that's just the way that he works. So a lot of that's to glorify God. I think the other thing, though, is just to remind us that we're not alone in some of our own hurts. I can relate to the things that were being shared. I wrestle with comparison. When I was at the conference and we had a moment where we were really kind of opening ourselves up to hear from the Lord, what I heard is, "You are my beloved, in whom I am well pleased." That's what I heard. And I just think it's just cool to hear that the Lord is doing very similar things in our midst. And if you wrestle with comparison or feeling like you're God's beloved, you're not alone in that, And we want people to know that and come and talk to us, and we can pray together and just be in it together. So that was a good time. The conference was a great time. I was telling our worship band that it was nice to be led by a by a professional band over those 4 days, and they were awesome. But honestly, being back here, being led by people that I know and love with songs that I'm familiar with, there's nothing like that. So it's really good to be back here and to be able to worship with our friends that we know and songs we're familiar with. So I'm glad to be able to teach tonight and share some things with you guys. If you haven't been a part of what we're doing here on these Tuesday nights, we've been doing a series called The Way, the Truth, and the Life of Jesus. So we figure, hey, we're followers of Jesus. We should try to figure out what are his ways, what are the things that he's taught, and what was his life like. And so we're going to continue that tonight. We're going to be looking at a passage in the Gospel of John. There's 4 different Gospels written by 4 different people that give us 4 different perspectives on who this Jesus is. Some of the stories are the same in the Gospels, and some are very unique. John's Gospel is a very unique Gospel. The other 3 are called the Synoptic Gospels because they share so much in common, but John's Gospel kind of stands out on its own. And even from the very beginning of the Gospel, it's unique. A lot of the other Gospels, they give a little family background on Jesus, like what's his lineage, where is he from, who are his people. Not John. John starts off his Gospel with this paradoxical, philosophical, theological, mind-bending statement about the person of Jesus. That's how he starts. I'm not going to give any background information. He's just going to come right at you with some pretty heavy theology and philosophy. The reason he does that is because his Gospel's later, and he's addressing the church at a point where they needed to dig deeper in Christology, which is just a fancy word to say who Jesus really is. Like, who is this Jesus? And it's a largely non-Jewish audience, so they have this Greek philosophical mind. That's how they look at the world, and they're going to want some philosophical explanation of who Jesus is. So John 1:1 is that opening statement that John gives to introduce his gospel, and he says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Paradoxical, right? You got the Word with God and was God? Like, how does that happen? He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. So it's describing this person who is transcendent and somehow is God and somehow is different than God. And both to a Jew as well as a Gentile or Greek person, none of that really makes sense. For a Jewish person to think that God could be a man, that is complete heresy. And even for a Greek thinker, the idea that a real God would inhabit flesh in this period of Greek thinking was considered impure. Material stuff was considered kind of dirty, and so why would God do that? So it's a pretty paradoxical thing, but it's really true about Jesus. He is God, he is transcendent, he is eternal, but then in one point in time, he became man. And the word there is a Greek word, logos, and it's got a kind of a range of meanings, but basically it's reason or wisdom, and it's this idea that the accumulation of God's wisdom, his reason, distinct from the cosmos, the logos, came to earth. The very person who brought the cosmos from chaos into order is actually coming to earth. And in verse 14, so the next verse, you get a little bit more description of what happened, and it says that this word, this transcendent wisdom of God, dwelt among us, right? And we saw his glory as the only begotten from the Father. Again, paradoxical, full of grace and truth. Now we have this transcendent being who is eternal and otherly, and John takes 2 words to describe his life and how he lives. And the 2 words are grace and truth. And what John does in his gospel is he takes a collection of Jesus' teachings and stories and the things that he does. He says, let me just show you. Let me give you examples of what it looks like to be the God who came to earth, who lived a life full of grace and truth. And so that's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at just one of those stories, one of those events where we see God in the flesh live out grace and truth. Now, if you're a Christian, or even if you're not, Those are kind of familiar terms, like we probably have heard them before. Who hasn't heard Amazing Grace, that song, you know? So we have some idea. Truth, we kind of get that. But I think what Jesus does is he blends these things together in a way that's extremely powerful and it's actually life-changing. So let's take a look at this incident. It's in John chapter 8. And it's been described as the woman caught in adultery. So we're going to look at just a few verses. It's not a very long story, and then we're going to spend some time talking about it. So I'll let you guys flip there or scroll there. I'll get a drink of water while you're doing that. I know. I like this bottle and all, but it makes a lot of noise. When you sip water from it, it has to vent itself, you know? Don't we all? Okay. So I'm just going to do these 4 verses, set up the scene, and then we'll see what happens next. So it says, early in the morning, he, Jesus, came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act." So, I mean, you can kind of imagine the scene just from the description there, but one way to imagine it is kind of like this would be sort of the scene, right? You got this area, this kind of religious temple gathering spot, and I remember when I first heard this story, I kind of thought that it was off kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it was just Jesus, the Pharisees, and the woman. It was kind of a discreet thing. This wasn't discreet at all. It was in the middle of a religious building, right? And Jesus is teaching, so I'm not claiming to be Jesus in any way, shape, or form, but it would kind of be like this, where he's teaching and people are listening to him. And you have these religious authorities bringing this person in, and it says in the center of the court. So it'd be like they bring them in and everyone has to part ways so they can see this woman who had been caught in adultery. And that's what they announce. Could you imagine that? Like, what would that be like for someone if that happened right now? Where some of our staff, sorry guys, come busting in here and say, "Hey, we were just in the dorms, and we caught this person, you know, in the act, in the very act," right? And so maybe cleaning the bed sheet, who knows what that would look like, hair disheveled, but totally covered in shame and disgrace, brought into the middle of the room and saying, "Hey, we caught this person. Jesus, what are you going to do about it?" I mean, that's the scene. Just how traumatizing, how scary, how embarrassing. But it actually is even worse than that. Let's read the rest of it. In verse 5, "Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman." So it's already embarrassing and shameful, of course, but now her very life is on the line. "What then do you say?" They were saying this, testing him so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground. But when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Next slide. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone, and the woman where she was in the center of the court. Straightening up, Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I do not condemn you either. Go. From now on, sin no more." I mean, I think we love this story because Jesus was just such a baller, right? He just did the baller thing, you know? It's kind of like, in those movies, I don't watch a lot of these, but the ninja movies where all of a sudden there's the guy and everyone's coming in and surrounding him, right? And like, how is he going to get out of this? Jesus is like a spiritual ninja. Like he gets out of these situations where people are trying to corner him theologically. He doesn't kick them in the face, but he gets in their face, right? Every time, and he just says the right thing, and we kind of love it, right, when the religious, authoritative hypocrites get put in their place. Like, we love that. Like, that's just a good story, and especially when the person who is wounded and is being shamed is allowed to be forgiven and to be let go. You know, it's just Jesus just does the baller thing. And what he's doing here is he's demonstrating this concept of grace and truth. I think that's why it's so appealing to us, because it has both of those elements to it. It has both the grace and both the truth. And we're gonna unpack that. So what he was trying to do, it says they're trying to trap him. Basically, they're always trying to do this. They want Jesus to choose sides. They're trying to figure out really what side is he on. Are you really a Jewish rabbi? Are you really a Jewish teacher? Or are you the other guys? Are you the enemy? Are you us or are you them? Are you in or are you out? They're always trying to figure this out. And what they wanted Jesus to do is to say, yes, stone her. Because that's what the law says. That's what the Jewish law strictly says to do. So they're testing to see, are you one of us or are you not? Now, what I love about Jesus, not just in this story, but in a lot of the stories, is Jesus kind of defies those categories. He defies being placed on one side or the other, right? I mean, Jesus is transcendent, but he also came in the flesh. We see that in the very beginning of the book of John. He declares himself to be king, but he's also a servant, right? He's less than and serves others, doesn't rule over them. He's described as being Jewish, and yet he hangs out with the Gentiles and associates with the prostitutes and tax collectors, the very people the Jews despised. He's a male, but he also would bless and touch and heal and minister to women. So all these categories in this time, people are like, you're either this or you're that. And if you're that, you're often considered less than. Women were considered less than men in this culture. The Gentiles were considered less than the Jews. Certainly a servant would be considered less than a king. And Jesus is like, you can't put me in those two boxes. You can't do that to me. And yet I think a lot of times, especially today in our polarized, categorical world, we want to create categories so we can decide who's with us and who's against us, right? We have political categories. You have the Democrats and you have the Republicans. Which side are you on? You have those who are for guns or against guns. You have those who are pro-gay and anti-gay. We want to do this too. We want to just figure out these categories, polarize the things so we can figure out who is like us, who's with us. And then the other ones are, honestly, we often think less than, because they don't think the way that we think or act the way that we think, do the things that we do. And that's what we do all the time. We want to figure out who are we and who's with us, and then the other people are the they, the them. Do they think like us? Do they act like us? Do they believe like us? And if they don't, then often what happens is we only are going to love and only going to serve and only going to minister to those who are like us. And everyone else, they're sort of left out, right? Because they're less than. It's a way of us kind of deciding, well, who are we going to include and who are we going to exclude? But again, this is where Jesus is so different. He doesn't do what our culture does. He doesn't do what our kind of natural tendencies are to do. For Jesus, it's not like, oh, you're in or you're out, and us and them, a holy or an unholy. And he demonstrates that, right, in this passage. Truth and grace. So the truth piece says, yes, you committed adultery. And the Jews want to say, yes, you committed adultery. And Jesus said, yes, you committed adultery. But what the Jews wanted to do is say, well, therefore you are an adulterer. And that basically defines you. And because of your actions, that's who you are. And you are now excluded. You are unholy, and you're going to be excluded in a very radical way by being killed. The grace comes in, though, and says, yes, you are an adulterer. Yes, you got caught in the act. But your actions do not define who you are. You are more than your actions. You are more than your beliefs. And because of that, you actually are worthy of love and acceptance and dignity and affection. And Jesus extends that love and extends that forgiveness to her. Like I said, there's something in us, I think, that wants to define people by these sorts of things, by people's behavior, by their ethnicity, by their race, the color of their skin. Whether we do that consciously or not, there's something in us that kind of looks at the landscape of people and tries to figure out who's with us and who's against us, right? And oftentimes what happens then is we think, well, if you're not like us or you're different, then you're somehow less than, and we come up with derogatory terms that serve as really handy kind of shorthand to condemn a whole group of people. The N-word would be the most extreme example of that. And by saying that, what you're saying is that whole group of people, based on their characteristics, based on what they look like and some assumed stereotypes, are somehow different, and the derogatory term assures people that they're somehow less than. But what Jesus is doing here and what grace does is say, no. Who you are on the outside and even your actions don't define who you are. Our identity, and therefore our true dignity and honor, is something that's much, much deeper. It's actually something that is truly divine. And what that is the fact that every single person, the woman caught in adultery, the rabbis, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Jews and the Gentiles, every single person was made in the image of God. If you go back to Genesis, which is kind of the parallel to John's chapter 1, right? They're both kind of creation stories. If you go back to Genesis, it reminds us that regardless of what you look like on the outside, and even regardless of your actions, beliefs, whatever, you have an inherent dignity, value, and worth that comes through being made in the image of God. Like God did that, where he shares some of his attributes with his creation, the ability to think, the ability to love, the ability to reason, to have free will, those kinds of things were made in his image, and therefore we have inherent value. That's our true identity. It's deeper, it's more fundamental, and it's God-given. So yesterday, right, was MLK holiday. We celebrate the man who was a key leader in the civil rights movement. He had a cause to bring justice and equality to people who were excluded based on their skin color or their place of origin. And what some of us know is that he was a religious man. He actually pastored and preached, and MLK actually found the foundational truths of his cause of social justice were actually rooted in this very idea of the image of God. And I have a quote. This quote is from one of his sermons that he gave at a church. And ironically, the sermon is titled The American Dream. And this is what he says. He says, you see, the founding fathers were really influenced by the Bible. The whole concept of the Imago Dei is the idea that all men have something within them that God injected. Not that they have substantial unity with God, but that every man has a capacity to have fellowship with God. And this gives him uniqueness. There are no gradations in the image of God. Every man from a treble white to a bass black is significant on God's keyboard, precisely because every man is made in the image of God. One day we will learn that. We haven't yet, but his American dream is that one day we will learn that. We will know one day that God made us to live together as brothers and to respect the dignity and worth of every man. This is why we must fight segregation with all of our non-violent might. So Jesus and MLK had something in common. They're not going to grade someone on their actions or their words or their beliefs or degrade somebody on those things, because everybody has an inherent value that deserves to be honored and given dignity. So when Jesus comes on the scene, right, he just blows apart these categories. It's not like you're either righteous or unrighteous, you're either in or you're out, you're either holy or unholy. He comes in and speaks the truth. You sinned. In fact, every one of you sinned. We don't know what he wrote in the ground. We don't know what happened there. There's all kinds of conjecture. But likely what he did, since everyone kind of left one by one, the eldest to the youngest, he probably wrote down the very things that they had done, because he knows. He exposed them for their sin. So the truth is that all of us have sinned. But the grace piece is that, well, in spite of that, even though all of us have sinned, you are worthy and deserve love and forgiveness. It's grace and truth. I've had a lot of grace and truth moments in my life. I remember I was asked to speak on a panel representing the Christian view of homosexuality. And there were other people on the panel, and people were getting pretty angry because some of the things that I was saying. And so somebody asked the question, well, Jamie, tell me this. And there's been a lot of yelling at this point. If your son, Jason, came out, what would you do? Now, the expectation, it was almost like one of those things they did to Jesus, right? We're going to corner you, and you're going to tell us that you're going to kick your son out of the house. You're going to judge him because of his sin. That's what they expected. But what I said is, well, he's my son. And I'm going to love him, and I accept him as a person, and he deserves my love, and I'm not going to kick him out of the home. But I certainly would want to talk to him and talk about his lifestyle, but I'm not going to throw him out of the house. Now that seems pretty commonsensical to me, but it was earth-shattering for the audience because that's not what they do, and we're the they in this case, many of us here. The grace and truth thing plays out all the time in parenting, right? Grace and truth. You tell your kid, no, you can't beat the dog with a hockey stick. Right? That's bad. But what the kid wants to do is internalize that to say, I'm bad, you don't love me, I'm not worthy of your love. But the grace piece comes and says, I love you. You're still my son. You're my beloved. What you just did doesn't change that. It doesn't separate you from my love. It happens all the time in parenting where kids want to get all shamed because of what they did and want to go all bad on themselves, and the parents are like, what you did is bad, but you are loved and you are worthy of love. It happens in marriage all the time. I constantly wound my wife through my words and my actions and the things I do. When she constantly extends to me that grace that says, we're together in this thing. I'm not going anywhere. I'm in your court. I'm for you regardless of what you did. It's grace and truth. It's a beautiful thing. We're going to have a couple events, right? We're going to have a Veritas Forum where we're going to talk about human origins. We're going to have another event where we're going to love on the Pride Center, the Gender Equity Center. These are great places where we demonstrate grace and truth. We have a belief system. We have things that we believe. But we can have a conversation with people because what we're not going to do is exclude them, make them less than, treat them like the other just because they differ in their behavior, their views, and their beliefs. What we're going to do is we're going to love them, and we're going to show that they have value and dignity and worth because they're made in the image of God, just like all the rest of us. So we're going to have a chance as a community to live out grace and truth by entering into challenging, perhaps, conversations. But you don't have to hate the person just because they disagree or their lifestyle is different. We can extend the same kind of grace Jesus extended. I want to close by sharing a story of a couple friends of mine, Scott and Katie Foltz. And well, you guys probably don't know Scott and Katie Foltz. I'd be surprised if you did, though maybe if you go to church in Bakersfield, maybe you do. But Scott is legendary, and we're all touched by the legend status of Scott Foltz. And here's how you've all been impacted by the legendary Scott Foltz. You know when we have those barbecues at like the men's retreat or junior senior overnighter or the fall retreat, and there's that giant trailer-sized barbecue? That's the work of Scott Foltz. So way back in the day, he rescued that barbecue from behind the like ag building at Cal Poly. It was just a frame. And Scott put new sides on it and put a grill on the top of it and welded all the stuff. And I remember the day that he baptized that thing. And you got to know Scott Foltz. He likes to go big. He would do the bonfires at our men's retreat. He would literally bring jet fuel to start the bonfire. He literally brought jet fuel to start the bonfire. So he decides to baptize the barbecue, piles it full of wood, and lights this whole thing on fire. And what happened was the thing got so hot that the sides expanded and blew out the tires. on each side of the barbecue. So he's like, oh, whatever, I'll just weld some heat shields, we'll do her again. So this is Scott Foltz, the legend of Scott Foltz. He also built a booth for open house. It was 2 stories, had a picket fence on the top, AstroTurf, and a slide to come down off the top thing. Cost me $1,000, but it was worth it. It was awesome. So this is Scott. He's just a great friend of mine, and he was an intern on our campus, and he married a girl named Katie, who is also an intern, and I had a chance to perform in their wedding, and I wish they would have stuck around. I really love those guys as interns, but they felt compelled to move back to Bakersfield, where Scott took a job as a surveyor, and Katie worked in her church. They did that for a little bit, and then they felt the call to sell everything, to sell their home, to sell, I think they'd sell all their stuff, because what they're gonna do is they're gonna move up to Portland, Oregon without jobs to start a church. Like it was this tremendous step of faith, to sell everything you got, to move with another pastor and his wife up to Portland, Oregon, and to try to start a church. And Scott was gonna enroll in seminary, and he's gonna work to pay for things, because they don't have a church, he's gonna have to work. But they're gonna start this church with this other family. And they're up there like 6 months and trying to get this thing started. And then Scott was telling me how it all went down. He said, I was at dinner with Katie, and who was also there was Katie's mom and Katie's sister. And I decided to pick up the phone and answer the call even while at dinner. And who was on the other line was the pastor's wife, the wife of the pastor. They went up there to plant this church. And the pastor said, I just found all these emails. My husband and your wife, Katie, have been having an affair for 1.5 years. And you're going to have to confront her. I've confronted him. I got all this evidence, and it just goes on and on and on. Now, Scott's listening to this as he's looking at his wife across the table. But he decides in that moment not to embarrass her in front of her mom and her sister, but held that in over the course of the meal until they could talk in the truck afterwards. Now, when Katie retells the story, she knew in that moment what was happening. She actually says that I had been distant from the Lord, like didn't even pray for probably 1 year. But previous to that phone call, actually prayed and said, Lord, whatever it takes, I can't do this anymore. I feel trapped. This is awful. It's ruining my life. Whatever it takes, please free me from this. So she kind of knew, probably based on his reaction. You can read the person. So they get in the truck, and she just confesses the whole thing. For 2 years, they were having an affair. The whole time they were at the church in Bakersfield, while they're up there planning this church, they're having this affair. And Scott says, when I heard that, the gravity of the betrayal, the gravity of just the situation, he says, I got nauseous and I just started throwing up. Like the impact of that sin on him was physically wrenching to him. Well, what they ended up doing is they ended up moving back to Bakersfield. They got into counseling, and Scott got another job. But what happened, and counselors would say, when you're going through this kind of situation, you only tell the people who can really help you heal and get through it. So usually it's a limited group of people. But because this church plant was sent from this 2,000-person church, 2,000 people now knew what had happened. And Scott would say they would go into grocery stores and people wouldn't make eye contact with them. They wouldn't come near them. Parents of high school kids that were once in the youth group that Katie led at the church wouldn't talk to them, wouldn't forgive them. It was awful what they went through. So they went through counseling. One of the things that Scott said is a key part of the counseling was that he would know what she did with this guy. Like, rather than it be left to vain imagination, what the counselor recommended is that she share with them, not in every detail, but locations and times where they had sexual intercourse, so he wouldn't have to imagine what had happened. He would know. And one of those places was one of their cars, so he's like, I'm selling the car, and it's just this crazy, crazy thing. About 6 months pass, and I get an invitation to attend a birthday party for Scott Foltz. And the party is put on by his wife, Katie. Party's in Bakersfield. Now, I don't normally drive to Bakersfield for much. Don't have a lot of reason to go there. I usually wouldn't even drive there for a birthday party, but I wanted to go to this party. And you know how sometimes you're in a car, and I was alone, and you're about ready to enter into a heavy situation. You can't help imagining, right? What's it going to be like? Like, what's this going to be like? He's going to be there, she's going to be there, and all these people are going to be there. Like, what's this going to be like? And I couldn't help just wondering and imagining, and them on opposite sides of the room. And so I get there, and Scott greets me at the door in his regular jovial, larger-than-life self, and invites me into the party. And I didn't know where Katie was, and the party's kind of going, and I kind of saw her at a distance, and they weren't really together. And I'm like, oh man, this is just so painful. But then there was this part of the party where Katie brings Scott into the center of the room. And Scott's there, and I'm like, oh my God. And you could just feel the tension. Everyone in the room is wondering what's going to happen. And what happened was Scott treated Katie as though nothing had happened. Now, he had been through deep pain and deep grief, and certainly felt the wounds and the pain of her sin. But in that moment, there was no doubt that she was his beloved. He put his arm around her, he kissed her on the cheek, she leaned into him, and she kind of led us through a time of kind of encouraging Scott and telling us what we think of him and so forth. I think in that moment, it's a beautiful picture of grace and truth, right? Because he knew exactly what had happened. And there was no doubt in anyone's mind that she had committed adultery. Everybody knew it. And yet the one who was wounded most by her sin loved her unconditionally, affectionately, with no restraint. What also happened there is that Katie, though has every reason to be shamed and to be wallowing in her sin, accepted that love and forgiveness and stood in front of a whole bunch of people who all knew what happened, and was able to declare by her posture and her position with Scott, I'm his beloved. I'm forgiven. It was one of the most amazing pictures of the gospel, the simple gospel, right? And I think we have to kind of experience that in our own relationship with Jesus. As followers of Christ, we're going to be on both ends of this grace and truth thing. We're going to have to receive the grace of God. But to receive the grace of God, you need to be truthful about your sin and admit the ways that you've wounded God and wounded others. And then receive that grace that says, I still love you. I forgive you. And then as followers of Jesus, we have to be full of grace and truth and extend that to a broken world out there. And not judge based on beliefs and actions and all that, but give people the honor and dignity they deserve because they're created in the image of God. And then talk to them about this forgiveness and love that Jesus offers. That's my vision for us as a community, that we would be full of grace and truth. We'd extend it to others, we'd extend it to ourselves, and we allow God to shed his grace on us. I'd love for us to have more time to reflect on this, but let me just pray for you for the sake of time and pray for our movement. And then we're going to have a time to worship the God who came full of grace and truth. God, the truth is that we do stand before you exposed, naked, caught in our sin. And maybe some of us have committed the very sin that we talked about tonight. But others have committed, we've all committed all kinds of things in our greed, our envy, our pride, the way that we think about other people, the way that we've thought about our parents, the way we've thought about you. And so God, I pray that every one of us would offer those things to you And though they are sin, we would also receive the forgiveness that you have. That we'd be willing to invite you, Jesus, into our lives, who can wipe away not only the guilt, but the shame, and declare us your beloved. And as people who have been saved and washed clean and who have received this grace, Lord, we ought to be the first people to extend it to others. So I pray that we would be that, a people that are full of grace and truth. Yes, we can talk about ideas and differences and disagreements, but we do it with civility and honor. So Lord, thanks. Thanks for what you did in your power and in your grace. It's in your name that we pray, and you're the one that we worship. Amen.
Grace, what have you done? Love for me on the cross, accused in absence of wrong, sin washed away in your blood. Too much to make sense of it all. Know that your love breaks my fall. Scandal of grace, you died in my place, so my soul will live. Oh, to be like you, give all I have just to know you. Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever the hope in my heart. Death, where is your sting? Power is dead as my sin. The cross has taught me to live. Mercy, my heart now to sing. Yeah, these troubles shall know that your strength is enough. Scandal and grace, you died in my place. Sing it out. Oh, to be like you, give all I have just to know you. Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever the hope in my heart. Sing it out. Oh, to be like, oh, box you in. But I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. I used to think I could box you in, but I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. So I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. So I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. Lord, I've been told to be ashamed. Lord, I've been told I don't measure up. Lord, I've been told I'm not good enough. But you're here with me. I reach out and you find me in the dark. Say no amount of untruth could separate us. I reach out and you find me in the dark. Say no amount of untruth can separate. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, I reach out and find me in the dark. Say no amount of untruth separate. So I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord.
Dear God, just let that be our prayer tonight. Just let us be reminded of the simplicity of the gospel, God. And let that just echo in our hearts as we go on through the week, and just let us be reminded of that grace and truth that you have for us every single day and every single moment. We just praise you for everything you're doing in everyone's lives and the lives of those who went to Winter Conference. We just praise you for everything. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thank you, worship team. That was awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Those songs lined up like perfectly with Jamie's message. Did anyone else feel that? They were pretty accurate.
I just want to thank Jamie for saying what he said. I was sitting here and I was thinking, I was like, oh, this is like adultery. This is bad. Like, it's sad and all this stuff. And then in the end, when you get the image of like what it looks like to be open with someone and truly vulnerable with someone and accept someone and love someone, despite whatever you have like gone through, whether it's like with family or friends, or in this case, the marriage. And I just think that we should be excited in the fact that when we choose to love God and when we choose to give our lives to Christ and invest in that relationship, that we are his beloved and that we are truly cared for, and that doesn't matter what happens in a relationship, that we have the power of the Holy Spirit inside of us that will naturally give us that desire to want to love and to want to be more than the sinful nature that we are, I don't know. Good message. I appreciated it.
Yeah, and I also appreciated Jamie just reminding us of how our primary identity is in Christ and how God made us in the image of him, and just being honest, like, I've just been thinking a lot about like sin in my life, and just being able to be reminded, like, no, like, you are a daughter of the King and you have been forgiven and you're fully loved and fully known, even in any crap that you have. So I just want to connect with anyone out there who's maybe in that spot. Like, I'm right there with you, and God loves us so much, and our identity is in him. So thanks, Jamie. Okay, next week we got a super cool event coming up called Veritas Forum. Woo! So if you don't know what Veritas Forum is, it's this event where we get a Christian and a secular person or someone who's not Christian, and we talk about really interesting topics. And this year, the topics are, what does it mean to be human, and our being special, human being special. So there's actually, we're going bigger and better this year, so there's actually 2 nights. The first night is next Tuesday, so there won't be any crew. We won't be here, we'll be there. And we'll be watching a biologist. Oh, I have the names. Yes, next Tuesday at the PAC, 7:30 to 9, What Does It Mean to Be Human, with Dr. Josh Swamidas, who's a computational biologist, and Dr. Ed Himmelblau, molecular biologist at Cal Poly. So they're both really sweet. Then Wednesday, so again, no Tuesday meeting. Then Wednesday, next Wednesday, same place, same time, 7:30 to 9 at the PAC, we'll be answering the question, are human beings special? And that's from the perspectives of 2 Christians. But one's an astrophysicist, and his name is Hugh Ross, and he's the founder of Reasons to Believe. It's a really cool program. And the other one is Josh Swamidas, computational biologist. One's a creationist, and one is a evolutionist. So 2 different ideas there. If you want to sign up for help, look for Veritas Forum table in the back. Yes, it's in the foyer with the giant box that says, like, are human beings special? To get connected, you can help in many ways with that event. I think they're passing out flyers tomorrow morning really early. Free t-shirts may be involved. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up. So if you want a free t-shirt, wake up early, flyer a lot of things, and it's really soft. It's the same one from last year. It's super soft. So since there's no weekly meeting next Tuesday, the Tuesday after January 30th, mini plug, we're actually going to be having a faith and sexuality talk here with Matt Melendrez. So that'll be really interesting, really great. We'll be talking about faith, sexuality, LGBTQ community, like how does the church and all of that intersect. We'll be hearing from 2 people who are willing to share their story with us. So make sure to come back after we don't meet next Tuesday for that event. It'll be really sweet. And now we have a video.
For it. Baby, let the games begin. Let the games begin. Let the games begin now. Baby, let the games begin. Let the
Holy smokes. Oh my gosh. I had never seen that video until just now.
I know, that was more hype than I was like prepared for.
Oh my gosh, I
Like,
am ready
to
for it.
Run, like, I gotta take a lap after that.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Woo.
Wow. Good videos.
We're speechless
Oh my gosh.
after that.
That was NATO, Night at the Oscars. It's going to be a great event. Saturday, March 10th, near the end of the quarter. It's a good outreach opportunity. So invite your friends, invite your family members, invite your friends, invite your family members, invite your friends, invite your family members. And the money, well, actually, typically, historically in the past, the money goes toward cool organizations. This year, we're still figuring that out yet, so it will be updated when we know that information. The video submission deadline is February 21st. Videos should be probably 4 to 5 minutes long. And the topics include comedy, music videos, testimonies, something similar, maybe better
Parody
than you just watched.
and independent. Those are the other two.
Those are the other two. crewnato2018@gmail.com is where you submit the videos to. Just so you know. I might make a video. Maybe I won't. We'll see.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage freshmen, like, go for it. Like, don't think, oh, the older people with the fancy cameras in the cars can make videos. No, you can too, okay? My freshman year, I made a very embarrassing 6-minute long video with all my friends. It was great, but we got out there, you know? Everyone was like, hey, you're that 6-minute video. And we were like, yeah, it was, you know, it's a good time when you look back on it. But the freshmen out there, I just want to say, you got talent, you got inspiration. Get all your fellow Wowies together, make something beautiful.
Woo, woo.
Yeah, okay, so now we're going to do something awesome. We are going to take a group picture. Boom, 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 boom.
That means stand up.
And move towards the middle.
Move toward the center. Get close, like the family we are. Am I in it?
You can be in it. I'll take it.
No. I'll take it. Are we ready? I'm gonna take it. Okay. All right, I think I got it.
Excellent.
What? Oh, we're doing it again. Sorry, we're doing it again. My bad.
Round two.
3, 2, 1. I'm taking photos now. Good. Done.
Sweet. And
good night. Huh? See you at Veritas.